most of England and Wales, with a frost likely even in some urban areas. And, as well as the frost, there will be some fog patches, which could be quite slow to clear on Wednesday, looking particularly across the Midlands. It could be quite a foggy start here tomorrow, and as I said, that fog could take most of the day to shift. Some cloud and patchy rain in the far northwest. But for most, tomorrow's a sparkling winter's day. Quite a lot of sunshine, light winds, and after a touch of frost first thing, temperatures ticking up in the afternoon to about average 6, 7, 8 Celsius. The highest temperatures in the northwest, where it will be cloudy, but we could reach double figures. As for the outlook, well, apart from today's rain, most of this week looking dry, but increasing chance of seeing more of that dense fog through Thursday and Friday.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 9:30 this Tuesday morning, and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on GB News on your TV and your radio. I'll be bringing you all the latest from Westminster this morning, MP pay rises, a proposal on road pricing, and of course, grilling a Tory MP over those number 10 lockdown drinks. But first, it's your morning headlines.
A very good morning. It's just gone 9:30. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date with the latest news. The Met Police say they're in contact with the Cabinet Office over claims a drinks party was held at the Downing Street Garden during the first national lockdown. In an email that was released by ITV, the Prime Minister's principal private secretary, Martin Reynolds, invited 100 staff to, quote, bring your own booze for an evening gathering. Number 10 said it would not be commenting on the allegations during the current inquiry into lockdown parties. Government ministers are putting pressure on scientists to allow the UK to follow in the footsteps of the US and cut the COVID isolation period from 7 days to 5. It comes after the UK Health Security Agency admitted it had misunderstood when the isolation period begins in America. In both countries, it starts at the onset of symptoms or the day of a positive test, whichever is sooner. Asymptomatic people who test positive for COVID-19 in England on a lateral flow test no longer need a follow-up PCR test from today. They will still be required to self-isolate immediately. The aim is to free up testing capacity for those with symptoms. Now, doctors in the US have transplanted a pig heart into a human patient for the first time. The experimental surgery took 7 hours to complete in the University of Maryland Medical Center in Baltimore, with medical experts saying it saved 57-year-old David Bennett's life. Surgeons say he's doing well 3 days after the procedure. It's estimated over 100,000 Americans are currently waiting for an organ transplant. Tennis's governing body, the ATP, say the controversy over Novak Djokovic's Australian visa application has been damaging on all fronts. In a statement, it welcomed the court's decision to quash his visa cancellation, but urged players to get vaccinated and to comply with global travel regulations. Djokovic is now training ahead of the Australian Open. It is 9:33. You're up to date here on GB News. I'll keep you up to date with another news bulletin at 10 o'clock.
Good morning, it's 9:33 this Tuesday morning, and this is the briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Now, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson has personally been accused of breaking the rules during the first national lockdown. Last night, an email was leaked to ITV News outlining a drinks invitation to around 100 Number 10 staff sent by one of the most powerful civil servants in Downing Street, Principal Private Secretary to the Prime Minister, Martin Reynolds. The email said, "Hi all. After what has been an incredibly busy period, we thought it would be nice to make the most of the lovely weather and have some socially distanced drinks in the Number 10 garden this evening. Please join us from 6 p.m. and bring your own booze!" Exclamation mark. Well, on Friday, the Prime Minister's former aide, Dominic Cummings, revealed the existence of such a socially distanced drinks email, although not its wording. He said that he sent a reply saying that the event, quote, "seems to be against the rules and should not happen." Well, let's get more on all of this now with our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's live for us this morning in Downing Street. Darren, first of all, what's Number 10 said since this bombshell email has been leaked?
Well, not very much. They are relying on the very fact that Sue Gray is carrying out her investigation and that it is up to her to reach the truth, as they would put it. Downing Street very much relying on the fact that they will not comment until that investigation is complete. It must be said that we thought when this investigation was first launched by the Cabinet Secretary, it might have been completed within days or weeks before Christmas. It is now dragged into January, and with every new revelation, Tom, you might well suggest that this could carry on for a couple of more weeks, assuming there's nothing more to come out. I think the reason this is really quite difficult for the Prime Minister is, first of all, with this latest email, it's very difficult to argue that this was not a social event. Remember that picture that The Guardian had just before Christmas in the Downing Street garden? There was chatter, wasn't there, from certain politicians that this was essentially a work meeting that may well have involved cheese and wine. That claim can't really be made this time. I don't think you're meant to bring your own booze to a work event. In addition to that, there are suggestions that Boris Johnson was there with his wife, Carrie Symonds. Again, that is very, very difficult for the Prime Minister. How can he deny that parties took place if he was at one? And it raises questions also about what he has told the House of Commons. Has he misled MPs? Because you do remember at the height of this furore at Prime Minister's Question Time on December 8th, he denied essentially the existence of parties, or that he was aware of them. Again, I'm not entirely sure that argument holds weight. If you're there, you're pretty aware that the party is taking place. And finally, and you alluded to this, there was a sense that during Christmas this had kind of dampened down, had died away, that the kind of anger amongst Conservative MPs and the public had ebbed. That is clearly not the case, and there will be a lot of Conservative backbenchers asking themselves questions this morning about just how many more revelations are there to come, and how much are they prepared to defend the Prime Minister, considering that we have this drip feeds week in, week out.
And of course, it's Prime Minister's Questions again tomorrow at midday. This seems to be a bit of a gift to the Labour Party. I wonder how long, in your opinion, can this line hold from the Prime Minister that they're going to say absolutely nothing about it until the independent investigation has concluded?
Yeah, indeed, and many people asking that question this morning. Essentially, Sue Gray does not need to carry out her investigations to find out if there was a party in Downing Street, and if people attended if the Prime Minister was there himself. I mean, why does the Prime Minister need an investigation to find out an event took place if he was there? And I think that's the key message. You're right in terms of how long that line will hold. Undoubtedly, the next time the Prime Minister faces questions from journalists or indeed for MPs, they will want an answer to that. And surely Boris Johnson should be able to provide a pretty quick yes or no about whether this event took place in May of 2020. As for the Labour Party, the opposition, of course, they are making hay with all of this, suggesting, again, using that line that is one rule for the people inside Downing Street, the people who make the rules, and another for the rest of us. That is clearly resonating with the public. It is something that was pretty key, fundamental, I would suggest, in the changing of the poll leads in recent months, in which the Labour Party have now consistently overtaken the Conservative Party. And there will be anger out there. We heard it from relatives, didn't we, Tom, of people who had lost loved ones, particularly during the first lockdown, who couldn't go to funerals, who couldn't see their loved ones in hospitals, who were pretty, frankly, angry, frustrated and annoyed at what may have gone on inside the Downing Street garden during that first lockdown.
Well, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, thank you very much for that overview there from Downing Street. I'm sure that you'll be with us throughout the day with any developments that come from that building. Well, let's turn now to the view from a Conservative MP. Michael Fabricant is the MP for Lichfield and is defending the Prime Minister and joins me in the studio now. Michael, I'm sure not many of your colleagues are envious of this position of trying to defend something that really has angered quite a lot of the country.
Well, what I'm keen is that for people to understand the circumstances. It's not for me to judge whether it was legal or whether it was illegal. It's not only Sue Gray investigating this, but we now understand the Metropolitan Police are investigating this too. So they'll make the decision on that. But I think it's important for people to understand the context of all this. First of all, you know, when you watch television, you see the front of 10 Downing Street, you think it's very, very small. In fact, it's 3 buildings knocked into one and also connected with a building in Whitehall, the Cabinet Office. There are around 100 offices there. And I know at that period that we're talking about, people were working long hours, 18, 19-hour days, absolutely exhausted, to deliver actually one of the best vaccine programs in the world. And that's generally accepted. So the question is this. I think if Boris has a weakness, that weakness is loyalty to people who work for him and loyalty to his friends. Now look, you had these people working in closely together in enclosed, stuffy offices, and some of them are really quite small offices. And if they had this drinks party, which I think we now have to assume they did, it was then moving out into the garden to do it. No outside people were invited at all. It was the same key workers, and don't forget they were designated as key workers, which has a meaning in law, and that's something that I know Sue Gray will be looking at. And then they went into the garden for drinks. So simply from an epidemiological point of view, there's less chance of them spreading the disease than when in those 18 hours they were stuffed in the offices together.
Now, I'm sure not many people would dispute that. The problem seems to be that that same epidemiological view wasn't applied to people in other settings. People who, for example, were working in hospitals or indeed media organisations. Technically, I'm a key worker. I wasn't allowed to go out and sit in the garden with my colleagues and have drinks. Isn't the hypocrisy angle here what really gets at people?
Yes, I understand that. And I know plenty of people in my own constituency in Lichfield and Burntwood who feel very much as you've just expressed. But I would also put it to you that this is a controlled, almost military-controlled area around Downing Street. And the garden is an integral part, absolutely an integral part, of the Downing Street complex. So it was an enclosed system, if you see what I mean. Here at GB News, or indeed at New Broadcasting House, the BBC, they don't have such an enclosed, open space, if that doesn't sound a contradiction in terms. So I don't think that analogy is the same.
So there were lots of people in Number 10 who clearly didn't feel comfortable about this email. Dominic Cummings has said that he replied to it saying he didn't think this was within the rules. We hear that only around 30 of the 100 that were invited turned up. Do you think it's...
That I might say is because most of them wanted to get home to bed because they'd literally been working so long. But yes, no, I mean, you make a very important point, Tom. Yes, it may not have been against the rules, and that, as I say, is something that's being determined. But it's not black and white. And Darren McCaffrey was saying, and you were asking him, how long is this inquiry going to go on for? And the reason why it's not black and white, the reason why it's so confusing, is why it's taking so long to actually resolve whether rules were broken.
Many people will say the rules had some clear exemptions for work purposes, and indeed working in those 100 offices, whether or not that was contradictory to basic epidemiological principles, those were the rules. The rules didn't say people could have drinks, could have parties, could socialise. And this, looking at that email, looked like it was an entirely social, not work event.
Well, you know as well as I do that when colleagues meet, they do tend to talk about work. And again, it all goes back, if you like, to Boris's great flaw, his loyalty. Because Darren McCaffrey was talking about the position of the polls as they are at the moment. And when did that all start? It started with the Owen Paterson affair. And that was a question not of trying to defend actually Owen Paterson, but whether the process had been right. And that's why he was keen to support an amendment. We won't go into that now. But again, it's a symptom of what I think is a rather lovely quality. We've got a very imaginative Prime Minister, a Prime Minister who is someone with ideas. You know, we've had Prime Ministers for so long now who are boring managers. I could name them, but I won't. And some of them have been Labour and some of them have been Conservative. And I think it's rather nice to have a Prime Minister who's a visionary, who got Brexit done in a rather unusual way, some would say, with the prorogation and all the rest of it that he had to do, but he got it done. And as I say, I think his weaknesses are actually something that I find rather attractive. And what was he trying to do? He's saying, look, guys, you've all worked together in a very difficult situation, in a situation where you could have all caught COVID together, as he did at number 10 Downing Street and almost lost his life. It's a lovely sunny day. Let's have a break. Now, it may have broken the rules. It may not. We'll find out. But you know what? The motives were the right motives, and it was a controlled environment with no outsiders coming in.
Now, I remember that many people will see those sunny days. I was sitting for many of those sunny days in a small flat. At one point, at the beginning of this lockdown, I was told off by the police for sitting on a public piece of grass by myself outside my flat and told to get back inside my flat. Now, when people have experiences like that, and then you may well be saying that the Prime Minister was thinking that people were working hard and deserved a break. Well, lots of the country will have thought that they deserved a break too. Isn't this just a fundamental problem here of one rule for people within number 10 who think they can do what they like and have as many breaks as they want and socialise, whereas the rest of the country was suffering under draconian and, in some respects, anti-epidemiological rules?
Well, that argument is something that certainly chimes with many people. I understand that, and I have people writing to me in my constituency saying just that, but not in such eloquent terms. But again, I would say, you were not a key worker. You were not working in an environment where they happen to have a garden, which is part of the office area, a garden which others could not join. So there was no risk of spreading the disease. This is what people have to understand. Now, look, I'm arguing it from an epidemiological point of view, not the legal point of view. And I do understand. I mean, a friend of mine is the mayor of the West Midlands, Andy Street, and he's got a flat in the centre of Birmingham. It has windows, but it doesn't have a balcony, and he was feeling incredibly claustrophobic. I do understand that. I was luckier in Lichfield. I've got a sort of little terrace thing in Lichfield. But I do understand that. And, of course, I understand the anger too. But my reason for coming on this programme today is just to give the alternative argument, which nobody is really articulating at the moment, that A, these were key workers, and B, this was a controlled area, and no one who had not already been crammed together for 18 hours or so each day. I mean, you would not believe the hours these people were working in closed, confined offices, you know, were now going out into another controlled area, actually a garden, where there was less chance of it spreading.
Now, just finally, in a word, Martin Reynolds, if he was found to have broken the rules with that email, not the Prime Minister, Martin Reynolds, should he go?
I'm not going to make that judgment. An interesting question, but you tempt me. But on this one, I'm not going to say.
Well, Michael Fabricant, thank you for your spirited defence of the Prime Minister there this morning. A really interesting point of view, and one that I'm glad we've been able to have, and that discussion, a very important one on this show this morning. Michael, thank you. Now, a decision on MP pay is due earlier this year. The process is decided by an independent body called IPSA, although that hasn't stopped politicians weighing in. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, for his part, has urged restraint from IPSA, while Sir Keir Starmer has said that MPs do not need a pay rise, and we should all be saying that we don't need that pay rise and shouldn't go ahead. The Labour leader continued, the mechanism is independent, but I think for me, as leader of the opposition, it's on me to say I do not think we should have a pay rise. Now, the expectation is that MP salaries will rise by over £2,000 this year, in line with how public sector salaries have risen also by 2.7%. Well, let's discuss this now, the merits or potentially demerits of paying MPs more at such a time of cost of living squeeze. Joining me now is Sam Ashworth-Hayes, Director of Studies at the Henry Jackson Society. Welcome to the programme, Sam. Should MPs be paid more, particularly at this time?
Morning, Tom. Yeah, I mean, I've been an advocate for paying MPs rather substantially more for a while now, and I think, as you say, people have this idea that the cost of living is going up, tax revenues are squeezed, the government's spending a lot, so it's a great time to make savings, and that MPs are a good place to make that. Actually, that's sort of the opposite of the actual situation. And the worse things are, the more it is that you want to keep talent in the role and attract talent towards it. And Parliament actually doesn't cost us very much at all. Particularly when you think about it, you have 650 MPs, so a pay rise for them of £3,000 is not going to be much compared to, say, the budget of the NHS, which is well over 100 billion a year. And these people make incredibly important decisions, as we were just discussing with the first lockdown. But if you were able to attract more talented people into this job, retain them there, and get, say, an absolutely marginal improvement in economic performance as a result, so lifting average earnings up by about 0.14%, you could pay your MPs £1 million a year, and you'd still raise enough tax revenue to cover that bill and leave everyone else better off.
Now, that's a really interesting argument, that if you had more productive MPs, higher GDP, they'd pay for themselves even if you paid them some ridiculous wage. But many people will think that paying MPs more in the middle of a term isn't going to change the quality of those MPs in that building. Paying MPs £2,000 more this year than they already earn, which is an astonishingly high wage, the top 5% of wages in this country, that's not going to change a jot about the people who are currently in that building.
I think that's a really good point as well. And it kind of comes down to the fact that sometimes in order to make a change and to attract sort of quality into something, you are going to have to, as much as it may stick in the craw, you're going to have to sit there and say, well, actually, we may have to overpay one or two members now, so that when the next election cycle comes around and people make the decision whether they're going to run for an MP, which takes a lot of time, a lot of money, it's very stressful. And you have these people who are, for instance, let's say they're a high-performing GP or a lawyer or a banker or an economist, and they have skills which would be useful. So they have a sense of how the NHS works, they know how the financial system works, they know, they have good quantitative skills. You have to remember a really substantial number of our MPs can't tell you correctly what would happen if you flip the coin twice, what the probability of getting two heads would be. If you want to attract people with sort of quantitative skills into this role, you are going to have to make it worth for them to do it. And just starting by saying, well, actually, if you run for this and you get this job, you aren't going to take a significant decrease in your quality of living is probably a good place to do.
Well, Sam Ashworth-Hayes, it's a view. I'm not sure it's one that's shared by a particularly large proportion of the public, although I do always find in this conversation that that IPSA, this independent body that sets the pay, was set up so that we wouldn't have conversations like these, so that the power was taken out of MPs' hands, and MPs always comment on it anyway. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for in this conversation, but Sam Ashworth-Hayes, Director of Studies at the Henry Jackson Society, thank you for joining us for that discussion this morning. Now, British hauliers claim that they are facing unfair competition when travelling into the EU. UK lorries entering some countries have to pay road tolls and other additional charges. However, foreign vehicles entering the UK coming with fuel or goods could operate in the UK for 2 weeks without paying any tax at all to use our roads. Well, former Transport Minister Sir Robert Goodwill is saying now is the time to implement a system of road charging to avoid this free rider problem and fund investment into our infrastructure. Well, Sir Robert Goodwill joins us now. Welcome to the programme and congratulations on your New Year honour.
Thank you very much indeed.
First of all, can we just go through exactly what the situation is right now? Currently, there's a free rider problem with foreign drivers.
Well, when we came to power in 2010, we addressed this by introducing a £10 a day charge for foreign lorries. Now, that didn't go very far towards actually meeting the cost of the damage they do to our roads, and that's currently being suspended. But what we are looking at is whether we should have a more comprehensive system, because as more and more people are buying electric cars, fuel duty and vehicle excise duty is now diminishing, and it adds up currently to about £37 billion a year. Wow. So if everybody gets an electric car, we're going to try and fill that gap. So some of the systems that are in place now for people who have pay-as-you-drive insurance, I think could be used to apply to roads. So you could have a differential charging system. So, for example, at night, lorries could travel for free. In busy periods, it would be more expensive. And similarly, we could charge up, for example, people complain about out-of-town shopping centres. Now, they don't pay the same level of tax as some of the inner-city ones. Well, you could charge £1 for that last bit of road into that one, and we could, make people like Amazon pay for their delivery vans in residential areas. So I think we need to look at this as a way of actually securing the sort of funding we need to invest in our roads, and not just for lorries, but for all vehicles who use our roads, to enable us to sort of, in an intelligent way, make people pay for the investment they want to see on their roads.
It is interesting. People that don't drive their cars very much, don't use the roads very much, have to pay exactly the same amount now as those who use the roads an incredible amount.
Yeah, it's a sort of automotive road tax. I mean, my mother-in-law, goes shopping once a week in her little Fiat, and she has to pay the same road tax as somebody maybe driving their car every day to go to work. So, I think a lot of people, it's a bit like when water meters came in. I think the people who aren't doing very much driving will be very keen to have a pay-as-you-drive system. And I think so we could do it voluntarily for the low-mileage users. And then as it progressed, more and more people would see they'd be better off having that. And of course, the other thing is if you've got an alternative of public transport, if you pay to use the road, that might make it more attractive for you to save money to go on the bus rather than contribute to the congestion in our city centres.
It's a really interesting idea and something that could potentially have a big effect on the high streets. I wonder, it's so interesting that seeing that drivers are getting squeezed at the moment, forced into getting other cars. That is, of course, as you said at the first question, going to dry up a lot of cash that the government relies on. How quickly do you think a new system of road pricing could be introduced, and is the government receptive?
Well, certainly I spoke to the Chancellor last week, and they are aware that as more and more people get electric cars, there'll be less revenue coming in, and that revenue is needed, not just for roads, but for investment in rail and other infrastructure. So I think it's a decision we're going to have to make at some point, and the alternative would be just to charge people a tax on the electric they charge their cars with, which could be a real disincentive for people to get electric cars.
A very interesting point there. Well, Robert Goodwill, thank you for coming in with that story today. That is really interesting. Let's follow it and see whether the government does take it up. I'm afraid we've run up to the end of the programme now. That's it for me. But coming up, it's To The Point with Patrick Christys and Inaya Flarin Iman. Catch them after the weather.
Good morning. A much brighter day today across northern Britain compared to yesterday, whereas in the south, another fairly gloomy one with a lot of cloud and patchy rain and drizzle as well, being caused by this set of weather fronts. The low pressure tied into those way up to the north, and high pressure is moving in behind, and that will bring most of us dry weather for the rest of this week once we've lost the rain from these weather fronts today. But it is quite a damp start over central and eastern England in particular, some heavy bursts of rain here. Further north, we've already got the brighter skies, some sunshine through the morning. Chilly start, yes, but generally a fine day. Brightening up over northern England, North Wales and eventually South Wales cheering up. Maybe even the Midlands seeing a bit of brightness this afternoon. But for much of southern England and East Anglia, staying fairly dull and dank. But it is mild here, temperatures up to double figures. Further north, temperatures typically 7 or 8 Celsius. Still quite windy in the northwest, but not quite as windy as yesterday. It'll stay blustery here through the evening and overnight.